The following material is not an attempt to discredit the speaker. The video is intended to point out theological errors, expository mistakes, and logical fallacies. We encourage a more thorough research of the biblical doctrine of God, and continued growth in salvific knowledge of the divine nature. We wish the speaker well and blessings in his intellectual work on the subject.
Our theology can affect us. If you have the wrong theology, you can get confused. And serious errors affect us.
We continue our critical analysis of the Worship the Lord Your God series by Peter Lausevic, and today we are having a closer look at part 4 titled The Supreme Sacrifice. Peter starts the subject with verse in Isaiah 9:6, and, as an exposition of the text, he simply repeats it.
Who is Jesus? According to this text, He is the mighty God. Jesus is the everlasting Father.
As it was pointed out previously, Peter uses simplistic approach to biblical exegesis. He oftentimes doesn't interpret or explain Bible texts, and leaves his listeners wondering about the meaning of what he reads. Peter also leaves the impression that if Ellen White didn't provide any comment on a specific Bible verse, he doesn't have anything to say about that verse either. Here, Peter makes a special emphasis on the words everlasting Father, and just moves on without offering any type of explanation. If Jesus is everlasting Father, then who is his Father? Is Jesus and the Father one and the same person? Do we have two everlasting fathers? We have another question that we'd like all Reform movement preachers think about and answer. When you don't have anything to say on a verse or subject, will you count it below your dignity to look into the Bible commentaries written by other Christians? There is quite a few good commentaries readily available in electronic form today. Will it insult your exclusiveness if you use insights from John Calvin, Adam Clarke, Alfred Barnes, Robert Jamieson, and David Brown, to name a few? Next, Peter reads from the book of Evangelism, and offers an astounding interpretation.
He whose voice the Jews were then listening had been with God as one brought up with Him. As one what? Brought up with Him. It means that they grew up together. I do not grow up with my father or my grandfather. I may grow up with my brother, but not with my father.
Peter makes several hermeneutical mistakes here. First of all, he takes the verb to bring up, and offers only one of its multiple meanings. Second of all, with his literalistic approach to the text, Peter makes God anthropomorphic, leaving the impression that the Father and the Son grew up together as twins. Third of all, Peter overlooks the connection of the statement to the Bible, as Ellen White was quoting Proverbs 8 verse 30. And every time Ellen White mentions this verse in her writings, she does it in the context of Christ as having divine life, and as being always with his Father. Fourth of all, Peter could have given much more clarity by comparing different renderings of this verse in different Bible translations, much like he did, for example, with verse in Hebrews 1:8.
A.T. Jones, in the book Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection, page 13, he tells us that in the German translation, instead of saying, Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever, it says, Thy throne, O God, is from eternity to eternity.
The same German translation by Martin Luther uses the word master workman for this passage in Proverbs chapter 8. So does the majority of the English Bibles. Another important point that Peter overlooks when interpreting this biblical text is its genre. The book of Proverbs is poetical, highly figurative, and full of metaphors. Even though we believe the Son of God is represented by wisdom, we cannot interpret the verses like this one literally. However, Peter sticks hard to his interpretive literalism, and throws another astonishing idea of partitions in the Godhead.
When we are studying the nature of Christ, understanding who He is, we cannot separate the fact that Jesus is a part of the Godhead.
When you say part, you necessarily introduce division. If Jesus is only a part of the Godhead, then He is only partially divine. And the Bible explicitly states that in Christ dwells all the fullness of the Godhead. Unfortunately, Peter's teaching is not a mistake of one individual preacher. The idea of Christ's partial Godhead is incorporated into the Reform movement official list of beliefs. Next, in speaking about Christ's two natures, Peter uses controversial language and doesn't offer any explanation, again.
And in combining that eternal deity with sinful human mankind's nature, the combination of these two is our hope.
Did I hear you right?
Sinful human mankind's nature.
We trust Peter is well aware of the Baker letter, in which Ellen White warned them about the danger to be misunderstood by people during their discussions on the human nature of Christ. So far, Peter did a good job of losing the clarity on this important subject. The exhortation from the pen of inspiration to be exceedingly careful when we teach others about the mystery of the Incarnation is not heeded by Peter in this presentation. His emphasis on sinfulness of the human nature of Christ makes us wonder what Peter implies. Unfortunately, while Peter is endeavoring to defend the truth, he does quite a few things against the truth. In conclusion of his study, Peter quoted verse Isaiah 43:10. Commenting this verse, he brings the idea of divine coexistence.
In order for Jesus in any way to be called God, he has to coexist. He could never come into being after the Father. They have to coexist.
Here again, we face the problem of theological vocabulary. First of all, the word coexist doesn't exist in the Bible, but it doesn't mean you cannot use it in defining your doctrinal statements. However, it is imperative you provide ample explanation of the terms you employ in your theology discussions. For example, the word coexist implies independent but peaceful existence of rival ideologies. What does Peter mean when he applies coexistence to the Father and the Son? Do the Father and the Son exist independently of each other? Do they have different life forms? As pointed out in another video, Peter handles Isaiah 43:10 with literalist precision, thus creating many interpretive problems. Every word must be carefully examined, and every assertion strenuously guarded.
But you see, our doctrines affect us, and